Welcome to Tech Tuesday. My name is Abbie Ritchie, and I am the host of Tech Tuesday. You can find me here every Tuesday interviewing tech innovators, those who are involved in tech innovation in senior living. I've got a wonderful guest with me today, someone I'm really looking forward to having on. But first, let me go ahead and run our intro. Welcome to Tech Tuesday, Scott Collins. I am so excited that you're here. I've been watching, and I've been a fan of yours for a long time. So welcome to Tech Tuesday. Would you kindly please tell us what you're involved in, what you're doing, and how you got involved in senior age tech?
Absolutely. Abbie, thank you so much for allowing me to join you today. Really excited to be here with you and your audience. A little bit about Linkage and our background. We were started by a group of senior living providers back in the mid-90s, really to focus on managed care, pivoted quickly in the early 2000s to group purchasing. And so that's how most people know us. Along the way, though, we recognized we would never be able to cost cut providers into long-term sustainability. So we created a venture arm called Linkage Ventures, and also a market research company called Linkage Connect. And those three businesses working together is really how we started getting into the technology arena. Going back into 2010, 2011, we really saw an interesting future in the world of technology and how it would be able to help providers, but of equal or maybe more importance, older adults live their best lives. Over the years, we launched a series of private equity funds with our investment banking partner Ziegler out of Chicago. And to date, we've raised a little over $110 million to invest in early stage businesses with products, services, and certainly technologies focused in the area of healthcare and aging.
I want to know from you, because so many of us experienced the innovation that occurred with COVID. How much pivoting did you have to experience internally with COVID?
Yeah, so for our members who are senior living providers, for them it was a huge pivot, obviously, in terms of how they deliver supportive services to their residents, both inside their own buildings as well as those outside. Technology played obviously a pretty key role in that. For us at Linkage, it meant countless hours trying to identify resources for PPE for our members, testing resources and things like that. At one point, we got into self-distributing our own products only because we couldn't respond fast enough to the marketplace if we didn't do something like that. So it was certainly a challenging time for us, but I think we also used it to take a step back and look at technology differently, particularly in the area of resident engagement. And in fact, Linkage Connect, our market research firm, actually conducted some pretty interesting studies as we were navigating through the pandemic to identify what older adults were really utilizing in terms of technology to deal with this new reality that they were encountering. So certainly transformed our company, transformed the industry, and I think we learned a lot about how technology is now an integral part of how older adults kind of live their day-to-day life.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about that, the results of that study and what they really are using compared to what we think they use. But first, I want to back up just a little bit, because I know firsthand, I felt like I had gotten totally slapped by that whole situation. Oh boy, what I wish I would have done differently, how I wish I could have, planned ahead of time to set my clients and set my students up to be able to support them more. And I know that so many other people were in the same boat. But I want to know from you, what did you find from this study about how older adults are using technology?
Yeah, a great question. We've been conducting a similar study since 2011. It was one of the first ones of its kind to really dig into people over the age of 55 and understand how they consume technology. And some critical things came out back then and are still true today. there's generally a fundamental lack of awareness among our oldest of the old about technology, how it can benefit them and impact their daily life. Certainly, still challenges across the country in terms of connectivity or access. And then this last idea about affordability. What jumped out at us in the findings from 2020 versus some studies we had done previously was one, the age where there's a disconnect in terms of older adults using technology, being comfortable with it, and them not, is continuing to increase in terms of age, which makes sense, right? As more boomers are turning 65, that age of that line of demarcation that we found in the early 70s when we did this 10 or 12 years ago is now creeping up into the early to mid 80s. The other thing that was interesting is how similar the utilization of technology among older adults. And by the way, we break our research down into 5-year increments so we can really start to see how things change with the life stages.
You cannot go by decade to decade or generation to generation because it changes.
It is very dynamic. It's why, sadly, still much research that you see out there stops at age 65 and they throw a plus sign on it and assume everyone else is the same. You and I and folks tuning in know that that's absolutely not the case. Right. And what we found was that what they were using is probably very similar to what you and I were using. Lots of Netflix utilization, Instacart, Amazon, things like that, to really start bringing the world closer to them when they were in more of a stage of isolation. Yeah. And I think it really accelerated in many ways people's ability to understand what technology is out there to help them live a fuller life, and also how to incorporate it into their day-to-day routine, so to speak.
Yes, and when you're looking at technology for senior living communities, because I really want to try to get to the heart of the matter here and things that are going to really help senior living communities, whether it has to do with workforce issues and or occupancy, what are some technologies you're finding that you're seeing today that are really reinforcing the senior living operator and their needs?
Yeah, but before I touch on that, I think what I'd love to be able to do is kind of share what we've learned along the way in terms of how to figure out what technologies to use. And we tend to break it down across multiple levels within an organization when we have these conversations. So really, from a leadership and team member perspective, what's the ROI case for implementing or incorporating a certain technology solution? And ROI means a lot of different things, right? The economics is certainly a consideration, but what happens kind of from a productivity perspective or in terms of enhancing the customer experience, creating differentiation for the organization, and ultimately, how does this improve somebody's lives? And then from a resident standpoint, we focus again in terms of how well does it deliver against that promise of engagement. And I think Scott Moody from K4 Connect did a really good job of distilling it down to how does it make things simpler? How does it help them be healthier? And how does it help them live a happier life? So sort of with that as a backdrop, as we look at what technologies we're seeing implemented from a provider standpoint, certainly for our staff, training is a critical component. Company that we love, Embodied Labs, has taken virtual reality and used it to help improve the ability to train our employees or our team members so they can truly use this virtual reality to step inside the shoes of whether it's a resident, a family member, and not just like the old ways of training people where you might put cotton in their ears or Vaseline on their glasses. This really walks them in from an emotional standpoint to understand how that works. Certainly
I love that example, because when you start talking in that regard, then we can really get behind the social, the psychological, the physical degree in which someone else might be experiencing something. And it is so much more powerful to be able to walk in someone's shoes than just read about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, not to harp on this, but all those other training methodologies, you're still a young person between your ears. With something like this that's so immersive, it
Yeah.
starts to narrow your field of vision. It starts to create confusion. And at first you're thinking there must be something wrong with this technology. And then you realize, oh my goodness, these are the things that my residents, the people I'm providing support for, are dealing with on a daily basis. So certainly things like that we think are super important. Again, from more of an organizational perspective, companies like K4 Connect, which is bringing together all these disparate technologies. So if your audience members kind of think in terms of how many different technology solutions are used by providers, it's unbelievable. And they all kind of sit in silos.
Mhm.
So what they do is they kind of bring all those various disparate pieces of technology together into a single unified interface. And so it really helps improve the ability to leverage those different tools. And then certainly we actually just launched a new company called Healthonomy, where we're trying to address workforce a little bit differently. We're trying to utilize robotic process automation to optimize and automate different back office workflows. So we're piloting that on a number of different communities right now, focused on rev cycle management and collections. But really, how can we help automate those functions that are very repetitive and mundane and allow you to redeploy your human assets where they're more appropriately utilized? And then,
Do you want to
yeah,
try that here in my office?
exactly. And then from a resident standpoint, I go back to really what I said previously about Linkage taking some time because we couldn't go out and see people. So we had the ability to step back and look at our portfolio of offerings for our members and their residents and figure out how we could really bolster that. So yes, we're seeing increased use of things like Netflix, Alexa, Instacart, and so on. But beyond that, some of the things that we've really honed in on, Independent, this interactive television experience that can really do a number of different things to improve the day-to-day life for residents. One Day University, utilizing technology to expose our older adult and resident population to all kinds of different learning opportunities. Artful enrichment. So this idea of using this virtual connectivity to participate in art classes and really unlock your creative capabilities. Things like Spyro 100. Certainly, how do we use technology to stay more active, to improve our health and wellness? And then certainly something like Restore Skills, which I love. They're using this sort of interactive virtual reality to gamify rehab therapy. So doing things that look like they're fun, but actually have very clear healthcare benefits that are reimbursable. And then from a sales and marketing perspective, I'll just say there are so many great solutions out there right now. It's hard to nail down one and recommend it. It kind of is something you have to tailor to your own specific organization or community.
Okay, I want to go ahead and put this question up, and if you can answer it, that would be great because you have
Sure.
named so many different companies. I also was just like, I got to write this down. I got to write this down. I got to write this down. So later on, I'm going to go back and write them all down and I'll post them. But what was the name of the robotics company that you mentioned a little while ago?
Yeah, it's a company called Healthonomy, and it's robotic process automation. So utilizing digital workers, and it's really a digital workforce solution, right? To automate and optimize workflows.
How do you find out about new technologies?
Uh, Boy, you know, great question. And as I've been thinking about that, here's how it kind of shakes out. Thought leaders in the industry. It sounds super cliche, but I'm as big an audience member as anyone. And there's people like Steve Moran and yourself who've been doing this for a long time, who are my go-tos, along with Lori Orloff. David Lindemann from Citrus out at UC Berkeley is not only a thought leader here in the U.S., but really brings together teams of experts from around the world. So when we look at new technologies, we really look at it both from a U.S. standpoint, but then we have a network of global thought leaders that we lean on that bring us information about new technology they want us to test or look at. And then certainly through our investment activities. As I mentioned earlier, our private equity funds over the last few years, we've looked at more than 2,000 different companies as a part of that process. 120 of them have been highlighted or showcased in our Ziegler Linkage Academy. So we do that for our limited partners, our investors in the fund. We've conducted roughly 30 or so pilot programs over that time and made nearly 40 investments. And then finally, Linkage Connect, our market research consultancy, they get approached all the time about not from just startups or early stage businesses, but certainly large publicly traded companies who are wanting to know what technologies are out there. And so we do a lot of projects and certainly learn a lot from that activity as well.
Yeah, me too. I get a whole bunch of them in my inbox as well. So I want to know from you, did you have any really surprising major technology fails, that things that you were just so passionate about, you thought were going to fly, they're just going to be amazing, and it just went nowhere?
Yeah. I'll share this with you from two perspectives. One at Linkage, and so what we use in terms of technology solutions is going to be a little bit different than what providers use, but I think the key learning from it is applicable to all. One, have a clear. So yes, the short answer: we've had major technology fails. One, understand down to your DNA how this technology is going to advance your strategic initiatives as an organization. There's so much stuff coming at us, so much stuff coming at providers. You really need to be able to have a team, a cross-functional team, pulled together to sift through it and distill it down to how is this going to be a force multiplier for us and allow us to do more of what we do and do that better. Like I said, make sure that you engage key stakeholders from throughout the organization. This is a mistake we made in deciding on certain things in a vacuum, as opposed to engaging our customers, different folks from throughout the organization, our vendor community, and for providers, engage your residents deeply and often, along with the folks who are going to be working with them, responsible for rolling out the technology. Ask super hard questions of your vendors to make sure you can discern between what they say the technology can do and what it actually does. And then once you've implemented the technology, and this is something we did not do, make sure that you have a really well articulated feedback loop on an ongoing basis so that you can understand whether or not this product is really doing everything that you wanted to. You also have to make sure that if it's something you're implementing and something you're trying to scale within the organization, that you have a really clear process for training and implementing. And given all the turnover that we have, how are you going to train on an ongoing basis when you bring in new associates? And then finally, cut your losses quickly.
Yeah.
If it isn't working, don't hang on too long and try to make it work as advertised. Move on.
Those are great actionable steps. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you, what are some things that you had your eye on this year?
Boy, we've had our eye on a lot. In terms of what we do, both from a fund perspective and just at Linkage, we're really still honed in on that resident engagement space.
Okay.
We really want to figure out, now that people are more comfortable using technology, how do we find that next winner that's going to really be able to help achieve not only the organization's goals for providing services to older adults, but really, how do you help people thrive? I do not like the term age in place. I think of it in terms of thriving wherever you choose to.
Yeah.
So what are those things that are going to help them do that? So that's really been sort of at the top of my mind. And then certainly workforce is always a consideration. What things are out there that are going to help our workforce be more effective? How can we use different technologies to make their life easier? How can we engage them more deeply so that they don't choose to go someplace else, but rather stay with us? Because there's so many different benefits to keeping a fully engaged and stable workforce in place. So that's kind of what we've been looking at.
I want to ask you about the resident engagement concept. So I know earlier you mentioned some different TV engagement platforms, which I think are wonderful, and they're the largest surface area in someone's home. usually, right?
Yep.
And residents usually feel so comfortable using their TV, they're not afraid to turn it on. It's been a stationary fixture in their homes and they like it, they gravitate towards it, it's on all the time. So I am 100% behind using that great big piece of real estate in your home and putting that one to use by using Cavo or Independa
Yep.
or one of the engagement platforms. So what else do you envision in terms of a resident engagement using a TV?
Um, so I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to
Okay.
answer the question, I think, maybe a little bit differently, because I still think there's a huge need in our space. Um, yes, for the technology, to be sure, but in terms of awareness and training. One company I came to know over the last 4 or 5 months is a company called Can Do Technologies.
Mhm.
And their sole focus is to help older adults, whether they're a resident in a community or in their own home, learn about, implement, and support their ongoing utilization of technology. So that to me is kind of table stakes that gets overlooked in the process of trying to identify that next great solution.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes we get so focused on the answer, we forget that we've got to really put that fundamental layer in place to support the rollout or the implementation. So that said, going back to your original question, what other things do I consider important from an engagement standpoint? One that we haven't talked about really is in the area of cognitive engagement. There's some really wonderful solutions out there. Brain HQ, some people may know it as Posit Science, is one that I really like because it's peer reviewed. It's got scientific backing behind it. It's been tried and true for an awfully long time. But I think that's one where uh, it benefits everybody, regardless of age. I mean, I should certainly be using it. Professional athletes have used it. Different government agencies have used it. But that's one area that I don't see a lot of conversation about, or nearly enough, I should say. And that's in the area of cognitive improvement, wellness, prevention, things like that.
Yeah, so Max just wrote in, he said he's learned the older generation is pretty good at tech. And you know what? I agree. And I will tell you that this is one area that I've noticed that, COVID has busted through this stereotype, this myth of ageism
Yeah.
has just, knocked this out of the park. So older adults can and are indeed strong at technology and have a vested interest in learning it. So that's something that I've noticed. And when the training is in place and they're taught the basic foundation and knowledge, there is the ability to continue learning. And that just reinforces what you were talking about.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I will say,
Mhm.
and this is a subject that is really important to us at Linkage. Um, when we talk about utilization of technology and all these great things, and yes, it does. Older adults are neck deep in technology and utilizing it, but there's also a large cross section of the country that's aging that isn't connected, that isn't maximizing the benefit of these different technologies. And I'm thinking specifically in our world from a brick and mortar standpoint around affordable housing. We One of the studies we did, I think it was 2019, was the first time we looked at two different cohorts. We looked at older adults aging within some type of senior living residential setting, and those who were living inside of affordable housing or government subsidized housing. And the disparity is actually kind of heartbreaking because the most basic need here is access, right? If you don't have high speed internet and Wi Fi, all the stuff we're talking about doesn't even matter.
Right.
And when we looked at the data, you can get this off our website. What we found was that the vast majority of older adults who have the means are connected and able to ultimately benefit from everything you and I are talking about today. But so many older adults, in fact, the majority of older adults in our country, fall into this middle market that largely gets overlooked. And I think we really need to have some difficult conversations about how we make sure that we are able to have access for them, make sure they know what technology is out there to benefit them, because all the terrific benefits that accrue to the older adults we're talking about in a residential setting like this is also available to them, but largely not taken advantage of because they just can't get access to it. It's not affordable. They don't have the infrastructure to support it. So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up as something that I want all the smart people that are tuned into you on a weekly basis start really thinking about.
You got it. You got it. Well, I want to also post this question and get this out there. And thank you, Christine, for putting this out there. And this would make a great polling question for those. And so at some time throughout the day today, I'll go ahead and put that out there, something to be thinking about as a polling question. And then, Scott, I wanted to ask you as well, what technology do you wish existed but doesn't yet?
Great question. Um, that's a hard one because I think there's so many pieces of the puzzle that are out there.
Mhm.
Um, but you have to really search high and low to find it. And a lot of times it doesn't work terribly well together. Um, so one, we've heard about the promises of robots for years and years, but it's not affordable, at least yet, broadly. Although we are starting to see some really interesting robotic technology in terms of delivery services inside residential settings that is starting to scale, which I love to see. But any technology that, as I mentioned earlier, is a force multiplier. How do we enable our organizations to do more with less, especially with the workforce challenges we're facing today, the impact that's having on census, and the ability to really execute our mission for more and more older adults? So certainly something in the area of robotics would be super interesting to me. Thinking about our employees or associates, technology that allows them to thrive, just like we focus on helping our residents thrive wherever they choose to do it. How can we implement a suite of technologies that provides that same benefit to our employees? Because they're so challenged right now, overwhelmed with having to do so much with so little, comparatively speaking. What technologies can we look at to help them really do more with less, but also demonstrate how much we care about them as people, not just as employees?
Yeah, yeah, that's remarkable. That is remarkable. Not too long ago, I was on a college campus with my daughter, and we saw a robot that was delivering food, and I was totally intrigued. My daughter, who's 15, she was not interested in it at all. But I know that that's really the wave of the future, is to see these robots that are going to be delivering food everywhere on campuses everywhere. So and because it's those type of automated tasks that really don't require a human touch, to deliver things, to clean rooms in hospitals, for instance,
Yeah.
to greet visitors in different places, that can be used in order to free up compassionate employees to do the work that they enjoy doing.
Oh, absolutely. And it's coming. I mean, there's a number of projects right now that are being piloted in communities across the country to do exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Not just delivering meals, but inside a residence dwelling space to be able to help them unload the washing machine or bring certain things around. So it's coming like a freight train. We hear a lot about artificial intelligence, and I was out of Berkeley a few years ago, and I heard somebody kind of turn it around and talk about IA, and it was intelligence amplified. And that's really what we're talking about here, is how do we take this amazing technology and intelligently amplify it to help all of our folks that we come in contact with live a simpler, healthier, happier life.
I love it. Thank you. You just put a big smile on my face, because I've been doing a lot of research on AI, and you just flipped it around for me. So thank you. I love it when I hear something different. So thank you so much. That's
Sure.
really cool. I'm going to be thinking about that for a long, long time. Now, Scott, I'm sure there are people who are listening right now who want to send their information to you. But what I want to do is, I don't want you to get flooded with a bunch of requests. What's the best way for someone to get information to you and your company?
Yeah, there's a few different ways. One, if you're an entrepreneur, there's a spot on our website on the Linkage Ventures tab where you can fill out a really simple form and make contact with us. Certainly, they can email me, reach out through LinkedIn. Um, it's an opportunity for us to give back. When I first started learning about sort of the longevity economy and these different technologies back in 2010, 2011, so many people who were rock stars then and are even more so to me today were incredibly generous with their time and their knowledge, that I've always said, look, if there's a way for me to pay that back or pay it forward in some meaningful way, I'm always happy to do that.
Love it. Love it. So, so people can find information on your website, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Super. Well, thank you.
Thank
You
you.
brought so much to the table today. I am so thankful, and I've learned so much. I'm going to go back here and link out all the different uh, companies and people that you've mentioned later today. We'll go ahead and repost this broadcast, and we are so very thankful for all that you're doing in the senior living space. So thank you, and have a wonderful day. And for those of
Abbie,
you,
thank you.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thanking you for allowing me to join you today.
It's my honor. Thank you, Scott. And for those of you who contributed today and participated in the conversation, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for that. And we will see you back here next week.